low thunder rumbles. The sky over Karnataka was heavy that morning, as if the clouds themselves knew a storm was coming, wind howling. Outside the grand halls of Hassan, whispers ran through the air, whispers that would soon turn into headlines, protests, and outrage across the nation. A young politician, born into legacy, surrounded by power, carrying the weight of an empire, was now the name on every screen. Prajwal Revanna. The heir of the powerful Deve Gowda dynasty, once hailed as the future of the Janata Dal, secular, now stood accused of something that would shatter not just his career, but the moral spine of Karnataka's politics. News montage sounds. Television anchors shouted his name. Social media burned with anger. Leaked videos, hidden drives, disappearing witnesses, and a man, nowhere to be found, because Prajwal Revanna had fled the country. It wasn't just a political scandal anymore. It was a mystery. A manhunt. A question that divided an entire nation. Was Prajwal Revanna a predator hiding behind power, or a victim of political conspiracy? Soft piano begins. But before that question can be answered, we must go back, far back, to the beginning. To a family whose roots were buried deep in Indian politics. To the pride, the power, and the curse of the Gowda legacy. Fade to silence. In the lush green landscapes of Hassan, where the monsoon rains kiss the red soil, a dynasty was born. The Revanna family was not just wealthy, they were woven into the political DNA of Karnataka. Prajwal's grandfather, H.D. Deve Gowda, had once sat on the highest throne of Indian democracy, the Prime Minister of India. His uncles and father were ministers, legislators, and kings in their own right. Politics wasn't just a profession for the family, it was blood. Prajwal grew up not in the shadow of power, but in its very heartbeat. Surrounded by security convoys, flashing cameras, and endless rallies, he learned early that charisma could move crowds, and silence could control chaos. At school he was ambitious. At university he was confident. By his early 30s he was already standing for elections in Hassan constituency, the family's fortress. Crowd cheering. Posters with his smiling face covered every street. Prajwal, the voice of youth, they said. To the people, he was the next heir of hope. And in 2019, that hope paid off. Prajwal Revanna won, a landslide victory. He became one of the youngest MPs from Karnataka. Soft music fades into ominous tone, but every victory hides a shadow. Every crown, a curse. Behind the glittering lights of success, there were already whispers. Stories of arrogance, of unchecked privilege, of a man who had inherited too much, too young. No one spoke them aloud. Not yet. Because in politics, silence is often the most powerful weapon. Years passed. The pandemic came and went. The country changed, and so did Prajwal. He had tasted the power of being untouchable, the arrogance of invincibility, the illusion that no one could touch a man born into a royal political family. But then, in April 2024, the illusion shattered. News soundbite fades in. Explosive allegations against Prajwal Revanna. A video leaked, then another, then dozens. Videos that claimed to show acts too disturbing to describe. Videos that spoke of power, exploitation, and abuse. Videos that, if true, could destroy not just Prajwal, but the Gowda dynasty itself. Within days, the state exploded in fury. Protests filled the streets. Women's groups demanded justice. Opposition parties smelled blood. But Prajwal Revanna was gone. Fled the country. Vanished into thin air. Jet engine fades out. Rumors said he escaped through Dubai. Others said he was hidden by loyalists abroad. His passport, his power, his privilege, everything seemed to shield him from justice. And the world began to ask, what was he running from? Guilt? Or a political trap? Because behind every Indian scandal lies a battlefield of ambition. And behind every downfall there are forces waiting in the dark, waiting for one mistake to break an empire. The Gowda family, once proud and unshaken, now stood cornered. Deve Gowda's frail voice, trembling with age, defended his grandson on television. Soft hum of an airplane cabin fades in. The camera drifts across the dark horizon, a lonely aircraft cutting through the clouds, its lights flickering against the endless night. Inside, a man sits alone, staring out the window. His eyes hollow, his phone turned off, his mind replaying the chaos he left behind. That man is Prajwal Revanna, wind howling outside the plane. As the world below burns with outrage, he crosses borders, first to Dubai, then whispers say he vanished into Europe. The face once smiling from campaign posters is now hidden behind tinted glasses and hotel curtains. Every flight, every immigration checkpoint is a gamble. Every news alert on his phone, a reminder that the dynasty he was born to protect is now collapsing because of him. Crowd chanting fades in. Back in Karnataka, the streets are boiling. Rallies erupt, slogans thunder. Women march with candles in their hands, demanding justice for the unnamed victims whose stories haunt every headline. And yet, no one truly knows what happened, because for every accusation there's a question, for every video there's a doubt, and for every truth, a lie hiding beneath. Soft piano note. This isn't just a scandal anymore, it's a battle for perception, a war between power, privilege, and punishment. In the quiet corridors of Bengaluru's political circles, the whispers begin again. Was this really about justice? Or was this the final move in a much larger political game? Behind closed doors, rival parties study every angle. Some smell blood, others see opportunity. For them, Prajwal's downfall could shift the entire balance of Karnataka's power. The Janata Dal, secular, once feared, once proud, begins to fracture. MLAs grow restless, alliances start crumbling, and the Gowda name, the very symbol of rural pride, begins to lose its shine, soft echo of footsteps in a hallway. In the old family mansion at Padmanabhanagar, Deve Gowda sits quietly in a corner room, holding a photo of his grandson. The cameras wait outside his gate, hungry for a statement. But the old man remains silent, the kind of silence that carries the weight of betrayal and heartbreak. For a man who had spent his life fighting political wars, this was one battle he never imagined, a war within his own blood. Fade into a newsroom ambience. Meanwhile, the Indian media is in a frenzy. Every night, new exclusive leaks surface. Panel debates rage, guilt versus innocence, evidence versus conspiracy. But beyond the noise, one haunting truth lingers, the victims' voices. They speak of manipulation, of secret rooms, of promises broken and threats made, of power that suffocates, of silence bought with fear. Each testimony, each tear, adds another wound to a bleeding state. And yet, even as investigators begin to close in, the man at the center of it all remains a ghost. Airport ambiance, faint echoes of announcements, Interpol notices are issued. The Indian government declares him an absconder. His passport is suspended. And somewhere in Europe, a man lives in shadows, moving between apartments, changing numbers, avoiding cameras. Every knock on the door feels like a judgment day. Every reflection in a cafe window feels like someone watching. Soft ticking sound. Time slows down when you're running from the truth. But what is the truth? Because as the investigation deepens, so does the doubt. Whispers leak from political insiders, suggesting that the scandal might have been timed too perfectly. Some claim hidden hands orchestrated the downfall, that Prajwal was targeted not just for his alleged crimes, but for what he represented, a rising heir in a family dynasty that had already angered too many rivals, a threat to newer powers growing in Bengaluru. And in Indian politics, threats are rarely allowed to live long enough to rise. Ominous hum builds. The police raids intensify. Digital forensic teams recover evidence. But strange things begin happening. Hard drives go missing. Witnesses disappear. And videos, once viral, start being quietly removed, censored, blurred. It's as if someone, somewhere, wants the fire to burn just bright enough to destroy a name, but not hot enough to reveal the real hands behind it. And amidst this confusion, a darker question emerges. If Prajwal was guilty, why protect him for so long? And if he was innocent, why destroy him so completely? Candlelight flicker sound. In exile, Prajwal writes letters to his family. Private, coded, emotional. Some say he still calls his father late at night, his voice trembling, insisting that he's been framed. Others say he boasts that he'll return stronger than ever. No one knows which version is true, but what's certain is that the Gowda name has never been this fractured. In public, the party denies involvement. In private, the walls of loyalty crumble, because politics, at its core, has no family, only survival. Soft rain begins again. Outside the Indian Parliament, a group of women protest under umbrellas, chanting for justice. Their voices echo through the corridors of power, reaching ministers who pretend not to hear. Justice in India moves like the monsoon, heavy, unpredictable, and often delayed. Files move from desks to courts, from statements to silence. And in that silence, guilt and innocence blur together, like ink spreading on wet paper. Soft instrumental rises, strings and drums. Then, months later, a shocking twist. Reports emerge that Interpol has located Prajwal Revanna in Germany. The air crackles with tension. Will he be brought back? Will he face trial? Will the truth finally be seen? But the process is slow, filled with politics, paperwork, and power games between governments. Each side plays its cards carefully, because bringing back a man like Prajwal doesn't just mean justice. It means reopening the wounds of a powerful family. And no one, not even the government, wants those wounds bleeding on live television. Slow heartbeats sound. In a quiet hotel room, far from home, Prajwal sits by the window. His reflection merges with the rain streaks on the glass. Outside, European sirens echo faintly in the distance. He picks up a local newspaper. The headline still carries his name. India's most wanted politician. He exhales deeply. Was this the price of ambition? Was this how the dream ended? Not in glory, but in exile? He closes his eyes. And for the first time, he whispers to himself, not as a politician, not as a Revanna, but as a man. What if they're right? Silence. Because even the guilty doubt themselves, and even the innocent can drown in shame. Back home, the investigation tightens. New evidence surfaces. Files link names, numbers, and networks that go beyond Prajwal, connecting businessmen, political donors, and enablers in high places. It begins to look less like a lone man's crime, and more like an organized web of silence and power. The line between guilt and innocence now seems meaningless, because perhaps in this story, everyone was guilty of something. Soft heartbeat intensifies. The victims of silence, the protectors of privilege, the masters of manipulation. And in that realization, the story becomes more than a scandal. It becomes a mirror, a reflection of the society that births its monsters, then hides them behind walls of loyalty and fear. Wind blows across the frame. The chase isn't over. The justice isn't served. The truth isn't revealed. Not yet. Because sometimes, the real story begins only after the fall. Thunder rolls in the distance, screen fades to black. Low rumble of thunder. The storm that began in Hassan had now spread beyond borders. What started as a scandal had become a geopolitical tremor, shaking the pillars of family, party, and power. At the center of it all was a single question. Would Prajwal Revanna ever return? Camera pans over New Delhi skyline at night, sirens faintly wailing. Inside the dim corridors of South Block, files were moving quietly between ministries. The government was cautious, too cautious. Every document stamped confidential, every discussion behind closed doors. Because this wasn't just about one man's guilt. It was about what that guilt could reveal. Names, alliances, secrets. the kind of truths that could topple governments. Clock ticking slowly. Behind the headlines, a silent war had begun, and in that war, truth was just another weapon. Soft news montage. Interpol notice issued. International probe begins. By now, India had formally requested Interpol's cooperation to trace Prajwal. Every newspaper printed his face, his name tagged with words like fugitive, absconder, predator. But the louder the noise grew, the stranger the silence around it became. Certain politicians, once vocal critics, suddenly went quiet. Television anchors shifted focus to other controversies. Hashtags stopped trending. Newsroom fades out. Eerie quiet. It was as if someone had decided that the scandal had done its job. And now, it was time to bury it. Soft wind blowing over empty fields of Hassan. Back in his home district, the posters once celebrating the people's leader were torn and fading. Villagers whispered his name like a forbidden word. Shops that once hung his photo now replaced it with new politicians. And yet, in the shadows, his loyalists still moved silently. Anonymous donations flowed. Calls were made from untraceable numbers. "Don't lose faith," they whispered. "He will return." Low, suspenseful hum. It was the loyalty of blindness. A loyalty born not of reason, but of heritage. Because in India, families don't just rule, they define what truth is. Meanwhile, the investigation team in Bengaluru struggled. For every piece of evidence they found, another vanished. Digital drives wiped, witnesses intimidated, court hearings postponed again and again. Justice was no longer about the law, it was about who controlled the silence. And behind that silence, a web was tightening, made of businessmen, bureaucrats, and backroom deals. The same networks that once protected the dynasty were now protecting themselves. Because when a scandal this big erupts, no one escapes clean. Everyone's fingerprints are somewhere in the dirt. Slow drumbeat builds. Then came the political counterstrike. Whispers in Delhi claimed that certain rival parties had engineered the leaks. Others accused the central agencies of turning the case into a political spectacle. Each side blamed the other, while the truth drowned in chaos. And through it all, one man's name, Prajwal Revanna, remained the perfect distraction. Was he the villain? Or just the decoy? Maybe the answer didn't matter anymore, because the war had moved beyond him. It was now a battle for narrative, a war for who got to tell the story. Typing sounds. Newsroom ambience fades in. In TV studios, producers planned their next exclusive. In WhatsApp groups, doctored clips circulated, twisting facts into fiction. And on social media, truth became just another trending topic. Bought, sold, and buried in 24 hours. This was no longer journalism. It was warfare. Digital warfare. Soft, eerie tone. In exile, Prajwal watched it all unfold. He had become both invisible and immortal, a man whose image lived in every debate, every accusation. He couldn't step outside without risk, but he couldn't disappear either. Because now, the scandal was bigger than him. Late at night, he scrolled through videos of protests, faces he once waved to now burning his effigy. Somewhere inside, the arrogance had melted. In its place grew something else in fear, not of prison, but of irrelevance. Because in politics, death isn't the end. Being forgotten is. Slow heartbeat. Rain falls over the tarmac. Camera lights flash through the mist. A black SUV screeches to a halt near the private terminal of Deve Gowda International Airport. Wind blowing, distant sirens. It has been months of silence, speculation, and shame. But now, after all the denials, all the headlines, and all the chaos, he's coming back. Prajwal Revanna. Soft piano note. The man who vanished into exile is returning home, not as a leader, not as a hero, but as a shadow facing the light. Reporters shouting, camera shutters clicking. As the door opens, the noise explodes. Flashbulbs blind him. Journalists push forward, screaming questions. Why did you run? Are the allegations true? Do you still claim innocence? He says nothing. Not a word. Just walks forward, eyes sunken, beard unkempt, his once tailored suit now wrinkled and heavy from the journey. But behind that silence lies something strange. Not fear, not arrogance, something in between. The look of a man who knows that the story has already been written, and he's just there to play his part. Crowd chanting fades in. We want justice. Outside the airport, protests roar like a sea of rage. Posters of victims, placards demanding accountability, slogans echoing into the night. And somewhere among the crowd, there are faces once loyal to him, now looking at him with disgust. The fall is complete. The Prince of Hassan has returned, not to rule but to be judged. Courtroom ambiance. Days later, the first hearing begins. The courtroom is suffocating. 1,000 cameras waiting outside, 1,000 whispers inside. He sits at the defense bench, flanked by lawyers and guards, his eyes fixed on the floor. Across the room sit the voices that accuse him, women who once trusted him, families broken by silence. Every testimony cuts like a blade. Every detail twists the knife deeper into a dynasty already bleeding. Soft silence. For the first time, the illusion of invincibility cracks. Because no matter how powerful you are, when truth stands in front of you, the air itself becomes heavier. Whispers fade into political chatter. Outside the court, politics rages again. Some call it justice finally delivered. Others call it a witch hunt. TV anchors spin narratives by the hour. Twitter burns with opinions, hashtags, rage. But amid all the noise, one reality stands firm. India is watching. For once, the spectacle is not about victory or party lines. It's about morality. About what happens when power meets consequence. And in that spotlight, Prajwal Revanna is no longer just a man. He's a symbol, a warning, a mirror. Temple bells faintly ringing in the distance. Back in Hassan, his family estate stands silent. The old walls that once echoed with laughter now hold only whispers of betrayal. Deve Gowda sits alone in his wooden chair, staring at the floor. He had seen political defeats before, but this was personal. He had built an empire brick by brick, reputation, respect, sacrifice. And now, it was collapsing under the weight of his grandson's choices. Soft rain outside the window. In that silence, a father's pride and a grandfather's hope both fade away. Meanwhile, the investigation tightens. Digital trails emerge, drives, bank accounts, private messages. The evidence begins to form a pattern too complex to ignore. But here's the catch. Not everything points only to him. Some leads expose a bigger machinery, a web of enablers, middlemen, fixers, even bureaucrats who turned a blind eye for years. The truth isn't simple. It's layered, it's messy, it's dangerous. Because in India, scandal is never a straight line. It's a spiral. And every step down reveals another face wearing a different mask. Low hum of morning wind. The sun rises over Bengaluru like it always does, pale and indifferent. For months the city has waited for this day. The day when a courtroom will decide what the people have already judged 1,000 times in their hearts. Church bell, faraway traffic. In the courthouse corridors, footsteps echo. Policemen adjust their caps. Journalists test their mics. A hush settles as the doors open and the man at the center of it all is led inside. Prajwal Revanna, the name that once meant promise, now whispered as a warning. Soft heartbeat. He walks slowly, head bowed, chained not just by cuffs but by history itself. Every click of a camera feels like a nail in the coffin of a legacy. Across the aisle, the survivors sit. Their faces quiet, their pain now part of public memory. They've said their words. They've waited for justice. Now they wait for silence to speak. Soft piano begins under narration. The judge's voice breaks the stillness. He reads for over an hour. Pages of evidence, arguments, contradictions. Each word slices through the tension hanging in the air. The nation watches live. Families stop mid-meal. Trains pause at stations as passengers stare at glowing phone screens. For once, India listens not to politicians or promises, but to justice. Slow fade into voiceover tone, and then, the words. Based on the evidence presented, the court finds. Long silence. No background music, just a heartbeat. Prajwal Revanna guilty on multiple counts. The room erupts, gasps, cries, the thud of hands on benches. Some weep with relief, others with shame. The cameras capture everything: the fall of a man, the triumph of truth, the end of an illusion. Soft rain starts outside. He doesn't look up, not once. No plea, no protest. Only the faintest whisper escapes his lips. Too soft for anyone to hear. Maybe it's apology, maybe it's denial, maybe it's nothing at all. Courtroom fades to distant murmur. Rain grows louder. Outside, the sky finally breaks open. The city drowns in monsoon rain, heavy, cleansing, unstoppable. Reporters shout into microphones. Crowds chant for justice. Opposition leaders make speeches about morality as if morality were theirs to give. But somewhere behind the spectacle, an older man watches on a flickering television. Deve Gowda, his face motionless, his eyes glassy. A lifetime of politics, power, and pride, now reduced to this. He switches off the screen. For the first time in decades, there is no camera waiting, no crowd to please. Only silence. Soft violin theme rises. In Hassan, the family mansion stands empty. The gates rust, the portraits fade. The dynasty that once promised change has become a lesson in what power does when it forgets to listen. The people move on as people always do. Elections come, new faces rise, but the whispers remain. In tea stalls, on buses, in the memory of those who watched a prince fall from grace. Candle flicker sound. Years later, someone will open an old newspaper and see his face again. They'll ask, whatever happened to him? And the answer will be simple: he became history. But history is never just the story of one man. It's the story of what we let happen when power becomes bigger than truth. Soft choral music builds. The camera drifts over the courthouse steps, empty now, rainwater running down the stone. A single newspaper lies there, headline soaked and unreadable. Only one word still visible: justice. Wind fades to silence. And in that silence, the narrator's voice returns. Quiet, steady, final. Power is a mirror. It shows us who we are, not who we pretend to be. And in the end, every empire built on silence must learn: the truth doesn't die. It just waits. Long pause. Fade to black.